Peter, the problem of free will is attacked by literally dozens and dozens of philosophers, each one with very specific kinds of analysis of the problem. From your perspective, dealing with the problem of free will for more than 40 years, pick out some of the philosophical issues that are being brought up today, and how do they impact our understanding of the problem?
Well, one thing that's been discussed in connection with free will and the problem of free will very extensively for many years is the kinds of examples that were invented by the philosopher Harry Frankfurt. Now, I'll try to explain first why these examples have been thought to be so important by so many philosophers. Free will, at least as it's often understood by philosophers, is a kind of double power with respect to the future. That is, you're trying to decide between two or more alternatives, and you're able to pick each of them. And all right, but why does anyone think that's important? Well, because some people think that, in fact, this had been the usual view, that this is required for certain moral judgments. That is, you can't say that somebody did something wrong unless you believe that the person could have done something else, something besides that. This is the old position that's summed up in Kant's bumper sticker, ought implies can. Harry Frankfurt had some examples that showed that that principle might be wrong. And if that principle was wrong, then why argue about free will at all? You had compatibilists saying free will was compatible with determinism, incompatibilists saying free will was incompatible with determinism, but they both agreed that it was important to argue about this because that was relevant to whether free will could exist, and free will was required for these moral judgments. It looked like Frankfurt was pulling the rug out from under the old debate between the compatibilists and the incompatibilists, saying, it doesn't make any difference what you people are arguing about. Free will, no free will, it's not required for morality, or at least not necessarily so. At least this unrestricted principle you're using is wrong. So here's an example of the kind of thing Frankfurt was talking about. Suppose that somebody does something that you think he's morally responsible for. It doesn't make any difference what it is. Build everything into the case you like. That is, let's say that somebody, the usual gruesome examples that philosophers use, somebody shoots somebody else, and then put everything in to make that person responsible for shooting that person or for that person's death that you like. A miracle occurs in his brain, whatever. But then, having supposed all that, having satisfied yourself that A is responsible for shooting B, then add an invisible offstage manipulator. What this person, this offstage manipulator, this evil spirit, this mad scientist, whatever it may be, would do is he very much wants A to shoot B. He'd prefer that A shoot B of his own volition, but the important thing, the really important thing is that A shoot B. So he's formed this intention. If A shoots B of his own volition, he won't do anything. If A shows any tendency not to shoot B, to decide to holster his gun and walk off, then he will directly manipulate the brain of A and cause him to choose B. Well, A does shoot B of his own volition. So obviously he's responsible for shooting A because you said he was, and all you've done is add some offstage manipulator who doesn't offstage manipulate, he just sits there with a certain intention which he never acts on. And yet the existence of that intention that he never acts on removes the ability of A not to shoot B. He's no longer able not to shoot B. Because there's only, in every future that faces him, he's going to shoot B.
Either of his own volition or by manipulation.
Some of his not. of his own volition, but every future he's going to shoot B, and that means he's unable to do anything but shoot B. But surely the intuition pump, you can hear the machinery of the intuition, surely he's still responsible for shooting B, because all you did was add somebody who didn't causally interact with the situation at all. Maybe if he had decided not to shoot B and had started to walk off and then had been caused to shoot B, then he wouldn't have been responsible for shooting B. But that's not what actually happened. In the actual situation, he's responsible for shooting B. So, Frankfurt concluded, in this enormously influential 1969 article, the whole debate between the compatibilists and the incompatibilists is based on, the debate is what it is, but it has a presupposition that determines its importance. It's no longer important because being able to do otherwise is not necessary for moral responsibility.
So how do you shoot that down, so to speak?
Well, I'm inclined to think that Frankfurt does have a counterexample to the principle as he states it. And the principle is that a person is responsible for doing something only if he could have done otherwise. That probably is a counterexample to that principle. Although, first of all, I'm not clear that we hold people responsible for things that they do. I'm inclined to think we hold them responsible for the consequences of things they do, like the death of a certain person. And I'm also inclined to think that makes a difference. That is, suppose there's a certain state of affairs, and you're responsible for that state of affairs. But then it turns out that state of affairs would have happened no matter what you did because of an offstage manipulator. That is, no matter what you had decided to do. If you decided to do something else, he would have caused you. I'm inclined to think that now you're not responsible for that state of affairs, although you're responsible for plenty of other states of affairs, such as persons being dead because you shot him of your own volition. There are plenty of states of affairs you might still be responsible for. I think it turns out if you take an alternative principle, like saying that somebody is responsible for a certain state of affairs only if he could have acted sometime in the past that state of affairs not obtained, then you can't construct analogous examples of Frankfurt that undermine this, and yet this principle can be used to show that the debate between the compatibilists and the incompatibilists has a point, that it does make a difference which one is right. In other words, I think there are other principles that even if Frankfurt has refuted that one principle, there are other principles that could do the same work. Mm-hmm.
Another example is so-called agent causation that compatibilists use to justify their position.
You mean incompatible?
Yeah. Let me say that. Yeah. There is this other principle of agent causation that is utilized in the philosophy of free will. How does that work?
Well, some people are worried about the fact that if an act has no cause, then nobody can be held responsible for it. It's just, as one philosopher called it, a bolt from the blue. As another philosopher said, it's as if a freakish demon had inserted his demonic will into your brain and caused you to do something. An uncaused action is not a free action. This is a very old argument. So some people have said, well, maybe what causes the action does have a cause, but it's not some earlier event. It's yourself. Not a change in yourself, but just yourself. The Scottish common sense philosopher Reid had mentioned this is how we know about causation at all, by experiencing ourselves as cause. This kind of causation is called agent causation, substance causation. It gets various names, but the idea is that some event presumably in one's brain, is brought about by the person, the agent, the substance, and not by any change, not by any event, but by that thing. I don't know that that helps much, because if you suppose then that this kind of causation is real, a lot of the objections to it is that it's unscientific, that really all events, an event can only be caused by an earlier event. Maybe there's something to that, but I'm going to grant its reality for the sake of argument. Suppose that Freddie raises his hand, and that's the rising of the hand is caused remotely by some event in the motor centers of Freddie's brain, and that the cause of that event is just Freddie. Still, there's the event Freddie's causing that event. That happened at what caused that? So Chisholm thinks it's Freddie all the way up. And maybe he's right. Maybe that is a solution to that particular problem. Still, that event, or all those events, are undetermined. If God were to cause the world to revert to its state just before that happened, sometimes Freddie would agent cause the one action, and sometimes Freddie would agent cause the other action. After all, if he always agent caused the same action, what could be the explanation for that except that his agent causing that was determined by earlier states of the world? So if it seems that the coming about of this particular agent-caused act is a random event, in whatever sense it would be, his just performing the act without the agent causation would be a random event if it were undetermined. So I don't really see how adding agent causation to the undetermined random mix advances the problem at all. And that's why it seems to me that despite the alleged contributions of agent causation to the debate, the state of the debate is still a mystery.